My doctor told me I had 6 months to live until I discovered he was giving fake cancer diagnoses for insurance money. 78-year-old Edna Marie Collins had been feeling perfectly healthy when she went for her routine annual checkup with Dr. Marcus Reynolds, an oncologist who had been recommended by her primary care physician. But what started as a simple wellness visit turned into the most terrifying and then infuriating experience of her life. Edna had been a high school math teacher for 42 years, living a simple, modest life in her paid-off house with her late husband's pension and her own teacher retirement, providing comfortable financial security. She had always been diligent about her health, eating well, exercising regularly, keeping up with all her medical appointments. When Edna arrived at Dr. Reynolds' office for what she thought would be a routine consultation, she was immediately struck by how luxurious everything looked. The waiting room had expensive leather furniture, original artwork, and fresh flowers everywhere. The building itself was brand new with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. Dr. Reynolds appeared to be in his early 50s, well-dressed and charming, with an easy smile and confident manner. He spoke knowledgeably about cancer prevention and treatment options, making Edna feel like she was in capable hands. Dr. Reynolds ordered what he called a comprehensive cancer screening panel, including blood tests, imaging scans, and tissue biopsies. He explained that these tests were necessary for someone Edna's age to catch any potential problems early. Edna was impressed by Dr. Reynolds' thoroughness and attention to detail. She felt grateful to have found a doctor who was so proactive about preventive care. 2 weeks later, Dr. Reynolds called Edna with results that shattered her world. "Edna Marie," he said in a grave voice, "I need you to come in immediately. We need to discuss your test results in person." When Edna arrived at the office the next morning, Dr. Reynolds led her into his private consultation room and closed the door. "Edna," he said, sitting across from her with a serious expression, "I have some very difficult news. Your test results show that you have aggressive stage 4 pancreatic cancer." Edna felt the room spinning around her. Pancreatic cancer was one of the deadliest forms of cancer. She knew that much. Dr. Reynolds continued explaining that Edna's cancer was advanced and had likely spread throughout her body. He said that with aggressive treatment, she might have 6 months, possibly 8, if she was very lucky. Edna could barely process what she was hearing. 6 months to live. She was 78, but she felt healthy and strong. She had plans, travel. She wanted to do books. She wanted to read grandchildren. She wanted to watch grow up. Dr. Reynolds recommended immediate chemotherapy, radiation, and experimental treatments that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He explained that Edna's insurance would cover most of the treatments, but that she would need to start immediately. Edna left the doctor's office in a daze. She called her daughter Margaret, who lived across the country. Margaret immediately booked a flight to come take care of her mother. Over the next few days, Edna tried to process her diagnosis and make peace with her limited time remaining. But something kept nagging at her. Something didn't feel right. Edna had always been a logical, analytical person. It came from decades of teaching mathematics and solving problems. When something didn't add up, she noticed. The first thing that bothered Edna was that she felt completely healthy. She had no symptoms of cancer, no pain, no fatigue, no loss of appetite, no unexplained weight loss, nothing that would indicate a serious illness. Edna had researched pancreatic cancer online and learned that it was usually diagnosed when patients were already experiencing severe symptoms, but she felt better than she had in years. The second thing that troubled Edna was Dr. Reynolds. Pushed for immediate expensive treatment, he had presented her with a treatment plan that would cost over $300,000 and seemed more focused on the financial arrangements than on explaining her condition. Dr. Reynolds had asked detailed questions about Edna's insurance coverage, her financial assets, and whether she had family members who could help pay for treatments that insurance might not cover. Edna found it strange that Dr. Reynolds seemed to know more about her insurance policy than she did, and that he had already contacted her insurance company to verify her coverage before she had even agreed to treatment. The third red flag was Dr. Reynolds' office itself. Edna began to wonder how a small private practice could afford such expensive facilities, equipment, and staff. Edna decided to seek a second opinion before starting any treatment. She made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Williams, an oncologist at the University Medical Center, who had an excellent reputation. When Edna met with Dr. Williams, she brought all of her test results and medical records from Dr. Reynolds. Dr. Williams reviewed Edna's files carefully, then ordered her own set of tests, including new blood work and imaging scans. 3 days later, Dr. Williams called Edna with results that were completely different from what Dr. Reynolds had told her. Mrs. Collins, Dr. Williams said, "Your test results are completely normal. There is no sign of cancer anywhere in your body." Edna was confused. How could two doctors have such different interpretations of the same test results? Dr. Williams explained that she had reviewed all of Dr. Reynolds' test results and found serious irregularities. The blood work showed normal values, the imaging scans were clear, and the biopsy samples appeared to have been contaminated or possibly switched. Dr. Williams suspected that Edna had been given a false diagnosis and recommended that she report Dr. Reynolds to the state medical board. But Edna wanted to understand what had happened and why Dr. Reynolds had lied to her before taking any official action. Edna spent the next week researching Dr. Reynolds' background and discovered some disturbing information. Dr. Reynolds had been sued multiple times by patients who claimed he had given them unnecessary treatments. The lawsuits had been settled out of court with confidentiality agreements, so the details were not public. Edna also discovered that Dr. Reynolds had financial problems despite his luxurious office. He had filed for bankruptcy twice and had liens against his property for unpaid taxes. Most disturbing of all, Edna found online reviews from former patients who claimed that Dr. Reynolds had diagnosed them with cancer when they were healthy and had pressured them into expensive treatments. Edna realized that she might be dealing with a doctor who was systematically defrauding patients and insurance companies by giving false cancer diagnoses. Edna decided to investigate further. Before reporting Dr. Reynolds, she wanted to gather evidence that would ensure he faced serious consequences for his crimes. Edna called Dr. Reynolds' office and scheduled a follow-up appointment. She told the receptionist that she wanted to discuss her treatment options before starting chemotherapy. When Edna met with Dr. Reynolds again, she asked specific questions about her diagnosis and treatment plan while secretly recording the conversation on her phone. Dr. Reynolds repeated his claim that Edna had aggressive pancreatic cancer and needed to start treatment immediately. He showed her test results that appeared to support his diagnosis. But Edna had done her research and knew enough about medical terminology to ask informed questions. When Edna asked to see the actual biopsy slides, Dr. Reynolds claimed they were being stored in an outside laboratory and would take weeks to retrieve. When Edna asked for copies of her original test results to share with her family, Dr. Reynolds said that the results contained technical information that would only confuse her. When Edna asked about getting a second opinion, Dr. Reynolds discouraged her, saying that delays in treatment could be fatal and that other doctors might not understand her specific type of cancer. Edna left the appointment knowing that Dr. Reynolds was lying to her, but she needed more evidence to prove fraud. Edna contacted 3 other patients who had left negative reviews about Dr. Reynolds online. All 3 women agreed to meet with Edna to share their experiences. The first woman, Margaret Shen, told Edna that Dr. Reynolds had diagnosed her with breast cancer and put her through 6 months of chemotherapy before she sought a second opinion and learned that she had never had cancer. The second woman, Sarah Martinez, said that Dr. Reynolds had told her she had ovarian cancer and needed immediate surgery that would cost $80,000. Sarah had gotten a second opinion and discovered that she was completely healthy. The third woman, Patricia Jones, revealed that Dr. Reynolds had diagnosed her teenage daughter with leukemia and had started expensive treatments before the family discovered that the blood test results had been falsified. All 3 women had been healthy when Dr. Reynolds diagnosed them with cancer. All 3 had been pressured into expensive treatments, and all 3 had discovered through second opinions that they had never been sick. Edna realized that Dr. Reynolds was running a systematic insurance fraud scheme, diagnosing healthy patients with cancer and billing insurance companies for unnecessary treatments. But Edna wanted to do more than just report Dr. Reynolds to the medical board. She wanted to expose him publicly and make sure he faced criminal charges. Edna decided to work with the other victims to gather evidence and build a case against Dr. Reynolds that would be strong enough to send him to prison. Edna contacted a local investigative journalist who specialized in medical fraud cases. The journalist Susan Roberts was immediately interested in the story. Susan explained that insurance fraud by doctors was a serious federal crime that could result in decades in prison, but that prosecutors needed overwhelming evidence to pursue cases against licensed physicians. Susan agreed to work with Edna and the other victims to investigate Dr. Reynolds and gather evidence of his fraud. Over the next month, Edna, Susan, and the other victims worked together to document Dr. Reynolds' crimes. They gathered medical records, insurance claims, and recorded conversations. They also discovered that Dr. Reynolds had been targeting elderly women specifically because they were more likely to trust authority figures and less likely to question medical diagnoses. Edna learned that Dr. Reynolds had defrauded hundreds of patients over several years, stealing millions of dollars from insurance companies while putting healthy people through dangerous, unnecessary treatments. As Edna gathered more evidence, she became increasingly angry, not just about what Dr. Reynolds had done to her, but about all the other victims who had suffered because of his greed. Edna realized that some patients had died from complications of unnecessary treatments that Dr. Reynolds had prescribed for cancers. They never had. Edna decided that exposing Dr. Reynolds publicly was not enough. She wanted to make sure he lost everything: his medical license, his freedom, and his ability to ever hurt anyone again. Edna worked with investigative journalist Susan Roberts and FBI agent David Martinez, who specialized in healthcare fraud, to design a trap that would expose Dr. Reynolds' criminal operation. The plan was for Edna to return to Dr. Reynolds' office wearing a hidden camera and recording device while posing as a desperate patient, willing to pay cash for expedited treatment. Edna would ask Dr. Reynolds specific questions about her fake cancer diagnosis and treatment costs. While the FBI monitored the conversation from a van parked outside, Agent Martinez explained that they needed Dr. Reynolds to clearly state that Edna had cancer, admit that the diagnosis was false, or demand payment for treatments he knew were unnecessary. The trap was set for a Tuesday morning, when Dr. Reynolds typically saw his highest-paying patients. Edna arrived at the office wearing a wire and a tiny camera hidden in her brooch, feeling nervous but determined to expose the man who had terrorized so many innocent people. Dr. Reynolds greeted Edna warmly and led her into his consultation room, where Edna knew every word would be recorded by federal agents. Edna began by expressing gratitude for Dr. Reynolds' quick diagnosis and asking about accelerating her treatment timeline. Dr. Reynolds immediately became interested when Edna mentioned that she wanted to pay cash to avoid insurance delays. Dr. Reynolds explained that cash payments would allow them to use experimental treatments that insurance companies might not approve, and that he could start her on a special protocol immediately. Edna asked Dr. Reynolds to explain exactly what type of cancer she had and how he had reached his diagnosis. Dr. Reynolds showed Edna test results that appeared to support his cancer diagnosis, but when Edna asked specific questions about the biopsy procedures, Dr. Reynolds gave vague, inconsistent answers. Then Edna asked the question that would seal Dr. Reynolds' fate. "Dr. Reynolds," she said, "if I pay you $50,000 in cash today, can you guarantee that my cancer treatment will be effective?" Dr. Reynolds leaned forward with a greedy smile and said, "Mrs. Collins, for $50,000, I can guarantee that your cancer will be completely cured within 6 months." What Dr. Reynolds didn't know was that Edna had never had cancer, and that his promise to cure a non-existent disease was being recorded by federal agents. Edna then asked Dr. Reynolds how many other patients he had cured with similar cash payments. Dr. Reynolds began bragging about his success rate, claiming that he had treated hundreds of cancer patients and that his cure rate was nearly 100%. Dr. Reynolds also mentioned that he had developed special relationships with certain laboratories and imaging centers that helped him provide faster, more accurate diagnoses for patients who could afford premium care. Edna realized that Dr. Reynolds was describing a network of medical professionals who were participating in his fraud scheme. After 30 minutes of recorded conversation, Edna thanked Dr. Reynolds and promised to return the next day with a cash payment. As Edna left the office, she gave a predetermined signal to Agent Martinez, who was waiting in the parking lot. Within hours, the FBI had obtained search warrants for Dr. Reynolds' office, his home, and the medical laboratories he had mentioned during the recorded conversation. The next morning, federal agents raided Dr. Reynolds' office while he was seeing patients. Dr. Reynolds was arrested and charged with healthcare fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The FBI seized Dr. Reynolds' computers, patient files, financial records, and medical equipment. What they discovered was even worse than Edna had imagined. Dr. Reynolds had been operating his fraud scheme for over 8 years. He had given false cancer diagnoses to more than 400 patients. He had stolen over $6 million from insurance companies. He had caused at least 12 patients to die from complications of unnecessary chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Dr. Reynolds had specifically targeted elderly women living alone because they were less likely to question his authority or seek second opinions. Dr. Reynolds had also been bribing medical technicians to falsify test results and paying laboratory employees to provide fake biopsy reports. The FBI investigation revealed that Dr. Reynolds had spent the stolen money on luxury cars, vacation homes, expensive artwork, and gambling. Dr. Reynolds had also been paying bribes to medical board members to avoid investigations when patients complained about his treatments. When Dr. Reynolds' fraud scheme was exposed, it made national news. Edna was interviewed by television reporters and praised for her courage in exposing a dangerous criminal. But Edna said that the real heroes were the other victims who had been brave enough to come forward and share their stories. The FBI investigation led to the arrest of 6 other medical professionals who had been participating in Dr. Reynolds' fraud scheme. Dr. Reynolds was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He was also required to pay over $8 million in restitution to his victims and their families. Dr. Reynolds' medical license was permanently revoked, and he was banned from working in any healthcare-related field. The medical board established new oversight procedures to prevent similar fraud schemes. Edna used her experience to become an advocate for medical fraud victims, speaking at conferences and helping other elderly people recognize warning signs of healthcare scams. Edna also worked with law enforcement to train investigators about the tactics used by fraudulent doctors to target elderly patients. So Margaret Chen, Sarah Martinez, and Patricia Jones, the other victims who had helped Edna gather evidence against Dr. Reynolds, all received settlements from his malpractice insurance company. The families of patients who had died from unnecessary treatments filed wrongful death lawsuits and received significant financial compensation. Edna testified at Dr. Reynolds' sentencing hearing describing how his lies had affected her and the other victims. Edna told the judge that Dr. Reynolds had not just stolen money, but had stolen peace of mind, hope, and trust from people who had needed medical care. So judge agreed with Edna and imposed the maximum sentence allowed by law. After Dr. Reynolds was sentenced, Edna felt a sense of closure and justice. She had turned her terrifying experience into an opportunity to protect other people from a dangerous predator. Edna also appreciated the irony that Dr. Reynolds' greed and arrogance had ultimately led to his downfall. By promising to cure Edna of a cancer, she never had Dr. Reynolds had provided the FBI with clear evidence of fraud that could not be explained away or denied. Edna lived for many more years in perfect health. She used her remaining time to travel, volunteer, and spend time with her family. Edna also became known in her community as the woman who had brought down a corrupt doctor and saved countless other people from becoming victims. Dr. Reynolds spent his remaining years in federal prison, where he was required to work in the prison medical facility under supervision. He never expressed remorse for his crimes and continued to claim that he had been providing legitimate medical care. But Edna knew the truth. Dr. Reynolds had been a predator who had used his medical degree and patience trust to commit fraud and harm innocent people. Edna Marie Collins proved that being elderly does not mean being helpless. She showed that courage, intelligence, and determination can triumph over even the most sophisticated criminals. Edna's story became an inspiration for other elderly people who had been victimized by medical fraud. She demonstrated that fighting back against corruption sometimes requires taking risks and trusting law enforcement to do the right thing. Edna also proved that the best way to protect yourself from medical fraud is to ask questions, seek second opinions, and trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Dr. Reynolds had assumed that Edna would be an easy target because she was an elderly woman living alone. But Edna had the education, experience, and determination to recognize his fraud and fight back. Edna's victory over Dr. Reynolds became a symbol of how elderly people can use their wisdom and life experience to protect themselves and their communities from predators who assume that age equals vulnerability. The medical malpractice scheme that Dr. Reynolds thought would make him wealthy ultimately cost him his freedom, his career, and his reputation. Edna Marie Collins had turned the tables on a dangerous criminal and ensured that he would never hurt anyone again. Her story proved that sometimes the best medicine for corruption is courage and that justice has no expiration date.